continent. And as they approach the continent shelf, as you can see from the photo down here, that's the continental shelf where it's kind of shallow waters. They metamorphosize into their kind of glass eel form, and then the glass eels migrate to coastal and freshwater habitats where they recruit as the alvers, and they then spend the growth phase of their life cycle as a yellow eel, and this is often between 5 to 20 years when they are a non-mature adult. And finally, towards the end of their life cycle, they transform into silver eels. And these, what should be noted is that kind of the larvae, they sometimes passively cross the Atlantic Oceans with the currents. However, it is also possible that at some point during their later stages of the journey, they swim in an oriented manner. So past the larva phase, what the researchers were curious about is whether this glass eel, which is the post-larva, is whether once they are at this age, they then can orient themselves in the sea. So some past research, what we know is that the mechanisms and environmental cues underlining the orientation of glass eels is poorly known, but surveys and laboratory-based experiments indicate glass eels are attracted by terrestrial odor cues, low salinity, which is salt concentration, and colder temperature. However, these cues provide directional information in the forms of gradients that are highly variable because of weather conditions, glacier melt, and marine circulation patterns. Thus, on their own, these cues are insufficient to explain the successful orientation of glass eels in freshwater outlets. So what we know is that the Earth's magnetic field represents a stationary frame of reference for animal navigation, providing a directional cue that would allow any marine animal that could perceive it to orient the absence of any other environmental cue. Animals of numerous taxa, ranging from insects to birds and mammals, can perceive the Earth's magnetic field. In the marine environment, crustaceans such as spiny lobsters, which is over here, can you see me circling stuff? Okay, so those are the spiny lobsters. They are able to detect magnetic variations in the latitude and longitude and can orient themselves using magnetic maps. Similarly, the Pacific salmon, and this is the Pacific salmon, and this is the sea turtles. They can use magnetic orientation for long oceanic migrations and homing to natal areas. So the hypothesis kind of this whole experiment was that eels are able to detect magnetic fields at different life stages. So what they did is let me go back. Okay, sorry. So they tested the innate orientation ability of European glass eels newly arrived at the Norwegian coast using a unique combination of laboratory and in situ observations. So they conducted the test using a drifting INSU chamber equipped with a circular arena in which glass eels were placed, and their swimming and their orientation was observed while the DISC drifted in sinute. And what DISC is a way for people to analyze behavior, which is dominance, influence, steadiness, and consciousness. And so in addition, they submerged the arena in a circular tank in a magnetic laboratory on land under manipulative simulated magnetic fields and no other orientation cues. So the data generated in these experiments were used to assess the orientation of glass eels with respect to the magnetic field and the tidal cycle. So the orientation of glass eels was observed one eel at a time. Most exhibited a preferred compass direction. Furthermore, glass eels oriented with the magnetic field and changed their preferred direction with respect to the tidal phase. They tested each eel twice, equally distributing the number of tests between the eve and flood tides over a period of 7 days. Thus, they tested each eel once during one tidal phase in situ, which is this the yellow dot here. The yellow dot indicates the site of the in situ experiments, and the yellow asterisk up here represents the location in which they had their magnetic laboratory facility. And the swimming speed of the glass eels did not change between the tidal phase, sorry, and in situ or laboratory. One second.
Oh.
Sorry, I had like a coughing attack. Okay.
Are you okay?
Yeah, sorry. My apologies. I'm not used to like talking this much. Oh my god, it got me too. Okay, I'm alright. So for in the situ experiments, they deployed the DSC in the sea, where it was allowed to like drift with the current. And what they did is that they tested 54 eels, placing each eel in the circular transport arena and recording their orientation and behavior with a video camera. And through the mean compass orientation of each glass eel, they found that during the test, glass eels tended to explore the environment, moving continuously around the edges of the arena. This behavior kind of created noise in the accuracy of their direction, but however, the distribution of the position of the eels, sorry, I need another second. Sorry, okay. I'm gonna try to keep this short now. But basically, then, in the magnetic laboratory, 49 of the same eels in the situ were tested, and the orientation of the glass eels were significant at the individual level, with 35 of the 49 eels displaying orientation specifically during flood tide, but towards opposite direction to the north. So their conclusion was that glass eels have a magnetic compass and their orientation abilities appear to be linked to the tidal phase. So then these are a few questions I have for you guys. And just to end this off, what they said is that glass eels have a magnetic compass and their orientation abilities appear to be linked to tidal phase. This is the preliminary evidence of magnetic compass guided movement behavior, but could be tuned in by the rhythm in the early life stages of the fish. This compass guided movement, regulated by a endogenous rhythm, can be represented in many migratory species. So, with all that in mind, I was wondering overall, what are some reasons as to why animals migrate? Anyone can go ahead.
Well, it's probably so. My animals might migrate in search of food or other resources. So maybe if there's not a lot of vegetation by them, in search of maybe like a better home, or maybe to get away from other larger predators, might be some reasons.
Yeah. Sorry. I think um, I'm gonna just respond stuff into the chat. I hope that's okay. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening. My throat has anyway been kind of dry, so I'm gonna give my responses in the chat.
Do you want to step away and get some water to drink? Okay. Um, yeah.
I think sorry. I think I missed something when I was reading through the slides. So, it was cool about like how they showed the study about the magnetism. But with tidal waves, maybe this is just because I don't know much about tidal waves, but what is the relation between the um, magnet force and the tidal waves? Usually I just thought it only associated with the moon.
That's a good question, because as I'm thinking about tidal waves, it's really, it's that gravitational force. I've not thought about it in terms of magnetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I know that the moon and the gravity has something to do with it being like tides. But other than that, I really don't know much about tidal waves in general. So that's why I thought like this is really interesting, right? If eels and their behavior and if these eels and their behavior and their orientation can help predict tidal waves, that's such a cool concept. I mean, according to this third question or fourth question, they're critically endangered, so we probably can't use them, much of them, if there's not many around anyway. But it's just so cool. Like these eels, they travel the whole world basically.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
some animals in terms of their migrate, there's different ways that animals migrations. And I was trying to look in my Campbell biology book from so long ago, because they used to talk about this in the animal behavior section, that migrations, some animals it's tied to magnetism, but other animals it's tied to things like landmarks, or it's tied to kind of other ways that they orient themselves. So not all animals have not all migrating animals have the ability to detect the Earth's magnetic field. And I'm trying to find what those other mechanisms are. So you're gonna have to give me a second.
I don't think I've taken a biology course in but a few years, so I'm just soaking everything in.
Yeah, I mean, what you guys said is like, I was listening to it, but yeah, it's kind of fascinating how these animals can like detect certain things as like um, what what I was talking about in the research is that Some use like change in temperature. Some use the changing concentration of the salt, because in fresh water there's not that much, but then once you go out more, it becomes more salty. That's why like the ocean is a lot saltier than fresh water. But in regards to the first question, other reasons why as to might they like migrate could also just be like natural disasters, as like earthquakes, or as Ananth said, seasonal changes, or also some things could be overpopulation, or just human presence in a habitat. So I just wanted to share some of my answers that I came up with when I was writing out these questions. And then I was wondering what you guys, just like randomly, like anything that comes to your mind, like what do you think allows animals to like detect magnetic fields?
So their gut has magnetic like features in it, or little attributes in it that can.
The first thought that came to my mind is that I know that like metals are present in our bodies as well for like important nutrients. So isn't for me it wasn't too wild an idea to think that other organisms may have some sort of special features where metals in their body might have oriented. But I would not have expected bacteria themselves.
Like we have iron in our blood, so much iron that we can measure it. But with what you found, bacteria, I never would like. I would understand metal in a body, right? I mean, we all know we have iron in our blood. I wouldn't be surprised of metal being in an animal's body or bloodstream or whichever. But for it to be bacteria, that's a interesting topic to look at.
I think a lot of these are hypotheses at this point in time. Sorry. Well, it says that I'm looking at what is it? Physics.org, that they're saying that bacteria and phytoplankton, they have like magnetite crystals that allow them to sense the Earth's magnetic field. And then there's also some research to suggest that birds might have those in their beaks. So among birds that use the Earth's magnetic orientation to figure out their way around.
And that's actually interesting because then that begs, so if it's like built in to to their bodies, it's kind of curious, like what must that sensation like feel like, quote unquote? Because like we have no sense of magnetic direction, so do they just like have a tingling sensation like, yeah, this is the magnetic field this way? So
Well,
I'm just curious.
the Campbell biology book is kind of interesting because it talks about migrating animals and how they can orient themselves. So, like the simplest form is piloting, which is like you have landmarks, which is I think what we as humans do, right? We have landmarks that we go to. Then they have something called orientation, and in that case, the animal can detect compass directions in some sort of way. So magnetic fields are one way, but things like the stars or the sun's orientation, some animals use that. But then the third one is really fascinating to me because it says it's navigation. And so that it's an animal can figure out its location relative to other locations, even if it hasn't been in a place before. So like you could drop the animal off at a completely new location and it can figure out its way back using a combination of being able to sense, the orientation of the Earth, and its relative position to things. Yeah. And I wonder if, they've done experiments with that where they've, I don't know, intentionally blinded animals, but, tried to look to see how the lack of other senses would affect the migratory patterns. So, Dina, you were asking a question earlier about the tidal waves and magnets. And I've been coming across a lot of things that say that you can generate an electrical current when there are tidal waves plus some kind of magnetic force. So I'm wondering if that electrical current could also be potentially something that's guiding the animal's movement.
Do you mean like electrical eels?
Well, electrical eels would generate the electricity themselves, but the eels that I think Marion's talking about are not electrical eels, but perhaps they can sense electricity in some capacity.
Yeah, it's like hypothesized that they can sense, some type of magnetic sensation. And yeah, what Anantha was saying is that there are bacteria living inside organisms that can orient themselves along the magnetic field lines due to a chain of magnetic structures inside their bodies called what I saw was that it's called magnetosomes that allow this. So, but I know it may not be the same in all animals, like what Nellie was saying, how for birds it's their beaks, or I haven't really looked into other animals as to what specific, like I know for maybe like the lobster, I would hypothesize it has to do something with like their the things that they have hanging out of their head and stuff like that. That probably gives them some kind of information. And it should be noted that some of these animals like can't see, like they have very poor eyesight, like eels. I think they have pretty poor eyesight, so it's for them it's definitely not like landmarks or something like that, because also it's the ocean, so I don't know how many landmarks there would be for them. But yeah.
So when I was first looking at the slides of your presentation, I thought maybe like the eels have some kind of skin that allows them to gravitate towards whatever magnetic field they're orienting towards. But what the theory is that they've got the magnetic bacteria, or so the bacteria has the magnetic properties, that which is why this could potentially be possible. And that's just cool, by the way. Sometimes like I wonder like if other animals in the sea have this same bacteria as well. Like I know, bacteria goes on different bodies, but I wonder if it's only exclusive to European eels.
Well, I'm not sure that the bacteria that can detect magnets, I don't know if they have found that they're specifically in these eels. Again, I think it's at this point it's a hypothesis that could explain why some animals are oriented magnetically. Like I think all of these are really hypotheses at the moment. So I put a link to the Wikipedia page, which I know people tell you not to look at Wikipedia, but there's like 4 different, 1, 2.
I'll be honest, I feel like Wikipedia is trustworthy.
Oh, it is. They've got like a 95%, accuracy
I mean,
rate.
I
It's
don't know
just-
about you, but whenever I find something on Wikipedia and a teacher always says to double check or check on other sites as well, it's always accurate. I'm just gonna like say it from experience. Anything I've checked from Wikipedia just tends like I find it on another thing. Like it I feel like people who say it's not trustworthy only remember Wikipedia when it was first starting. Because when it first started, it was like that. But I feel like it really evolved now. And so I trust it, don't worry. I trust Wikipedia.
Well, I think that that's a very smart method. That's usually what I suggest to my students too, is you can start with Wikipedia and then look at the sources that they cited, and that's where you're really going to get a lot more information. But I will say there's 5 different hypotheses on how animals can detect magnetic fields, and it's possible that these are not mutually exclusive either.
I don't know if this I don't think this answers it directly, but one article I did find was that because of the geomagnetic lines of the Earth's magnetic field, one NASA like short explanation page said that because the seawater is a weak conductor, but is a conductor, as it moved back and forth, it interacts with the magnetic lines, and a movement of a magnetic field generates current. So there is some generated there, but yeah, that's a good question on how would you even detect.
There is, again, back to the Wikipedia page, they're saying, and again, not specifically with these eels, but then in some groups of cartilaginous fish, they have an organ called the ampullae of Lorenzini, which actually detects changes in electrical potential. Now, I don't know like what kind of tests they've done on this organ to see exactly how it functions, but it at least I need to click on another article to read more about it, but it seems like it's actually picking up differences in electrical current, not specifically temperature. It's not a thermo detector, it's an actual electrical detecting organ.
I'm wondering if anyone has any questions about the study. I know I kind of clicked through the methods, but if you want, I can go back and elaborate on that.
Do you mind going back to the photo of their migration? So they're European, and I'm just looking at the map, but they go to the between Bahamas and Florida. I don't know what that area is called. Do you guys know what the area is called?
What I have here is that it's the Sargasso Sea. It's like the star that I have there. Like that whole region is kind of
Oh, I see it.
where they go to, and that's where they spawn.
Oh, what was that? I didn't hear you.
Oh, I said that's where they spawn. Like that's where they reproduce and stuff. It is quite a long journey.
So, and the reason why I'm asking, because I think I had it mixed up. I thought they originally they were in Europe, came to next to America and next to the Sargasso Sea, then went back. But I'm looking at the picture again now, and so they were born near here or near this side, go to Europe, then come back.
Well, they
And I'm assuming that because most of their adult life is towards Europe, which is why. Because like when they spawn, they're babies, and when they come back, they're about to die. So I would assume like most of their life is near around that area. Or
yeah,
near other side.
yeah, I can show maybe a better photo of what it is. Because you're not.
Oh, maybe that can also like play a part in your fourth question, which is why they're critically endangered. Seaweed, deterioration, a lot of pollution. I remember a long time ago, a couple years ago, I was looking at a research thing in one of my bio classes, and I think you guys might be familiar with this because it's quite popular, I think. But with kelp forests and sea urchins and sea otters, and if a kelp forest dies because of water pollution, then the population of sea urchins will become very big. And I forgot what else I had to read on that. But it just reminded me of the whole point of it, what I'm trying to say, is that the kelp disappearing caused a huge population decrease in one of the other predators or prey in that area. I'm trying to remember, but I have a terrible memory. And so when Anath mentioned this sea being known for its seaweed, I thought back to how just seaweed or kelp, it being gone, and the whole effect it has on the ecosystem or the other creatures living in that area. So maybe that's why. If that's where they spawn, if that's where they need to go for their nutrients to be born in the first place, then I think I could assume that sea becoming polluted could be why they're so endangered.
I was thinking if a bunch of them are going to one area, if they're drawn towards a certain place where they migrate towards, and if a bunch of them do migrate towards that one area, wouldn't there be like an overcrowding or too many of them in that area? And who's to say that specific area where they migrate is better than where they originated from? So maybe that could be a contributor for why they might be endangered. Maybe these areas aren't as don't have preferred conditions for some of the organisms that migrate, possibly.
Yeah, like if they tried spawning in other sites as well, not just this one site, because you don't know if this is the most ideal site. Probably won't be if pollution keeps going around, but
Yeah.
it's literally like putting all your eggs in one basket. I think that term applies to this.
But Dina, what you had mentioned earlier, so I looked it up. I mean, there is something about that environment that is hospitable for them spawning. And it's not just this particular eel species. There's many eel species that spawn in that area. And in terms of pollution, what I'm reading is that plastic pollution seems to be an issue in that area. So it's possible that that could be the case. In terms of Allison, what you were saying with so many of them. So here's the thing. I don't think having so many of them is a problem. How do I put this? I think natural systems tend to control population sizes as long as we as humans don't interfere. So if they have like natural predators, for example, that might make it so that their population size don't reach that point where they're completely out competing one another for food, or they completely eat themselves out of food or out of resources. But again, that's dependent on their natural predator populations, which I'm assuming, this is a big assumption, that we have not manipulated. You know, if we manipulate their predator populations, then yeah, you could have an issue where their population sizes are kind of out of whack. But again, that would imply that they're in large enough numbers that they wouldn't be considered endangered in that case.
And there is like that typical thing where animals that have mass, like when they spawn, they have masses of them, like a lot of babies, but most of them don't even live. Like turtles, for example, or what was it? Baby crabs. They'll have thousands probably. Well, maybe I'm exaggerating, I don't know, but hundreds. But how many survive? Little. So maybe if that's just animals in general that spawn a bunch in one area. Oh, toads. Tadpoles. That's also what I wanted to mention.
Yeah, this is kind of, I just shared my screen just to show a little bit better of where their migration goes. So they are spawned over here in the sea, and then they kind of go back to Europe where they are yellow eels, and then they turn into silver eels, and then basically once they're silver eels, they go back to reproduce and they kind of die off there. So they just kind of do this circle loop. So. Mhm. Yeah, that's why they're called like, yeah, that's why they're kind of called European, and also European eels, and also as yellow eels, because they are in that for like 5 to like 20 years. I think they spend the majority of their time as yellow eels, if I'm not mistaken. I can double check on that though.
Elvers, number 5. I just find that word so funny. Elvers.
Yeah.
I want to remember that. Stage 5. Elvers.
And then I guess my other questions were just like, what did you learn something interesting, and if you had any maybe critiques about the study, anything like that.
I would have liked to know more about tidal waves in this. Like, not like like 3 pages dedication, but when we got to the discussion questions, I was asking about tidal waves because I just think it's interesting, like how we can possibly theoretically relate it to animals. I just find that cool, especially when sometimes when you live in the coast, you got to know about tidal waves.
Yeah, before your presentation, I knew that birds had some magnetic form of navigation and whatnot, but I didn't know eels and, researching now and finding other animals like bees and whatnot are able to use this to their advantage, which is really interesting how, we have really big animals and really small animals, and they're all able, or supposedly, we're theorizing here, able to use magnetic poles and whatnot to navigate. So I think that's really interesting, because I didn't know about some of the animals you guys brought up.
Also, we're also talking about animals that are completely different from each other. You've got eels in the sea, birds, tiny little insects.
Personally, I think it's cool how there's something like, of course, the magnetic ability. That's pretty cool by itself. But just the fact that we can't quite explain it, it's like a little bit of that curiosity gap. That's just like, I guess that's why people become scientists, right? It's like, there's a bit of curiosity gap. Like, how does this actually work? Because like it's not fully explained. So
And
that's what's cool to me. So
and the sea is massive. So, like, in general, navigation in animals is really something. Like a massive, massive world, and they know, or they can figure it out. It's just so, to me, I don't think I'll ever be able to fully grasp how navigation. It's a really complex idea to me because I don't think, maybe I just have a horrible sense of direction. It's just really cool how they can do that. How a lot of animals are able to just figure it out, even though they probably have never been to this area or that area, or they don't even know what the world scope is, but they just know.
And to your point, the ocean is so massive. There's so many organisms we still don't know yet. So imagine how many other organisms we still don't know about that are able to use this to their advantage. I mean, it is over our head, but it is really interesting.
And I think it's kind of, I had like one of the questions is like, why do we like kind of investigate this stuff? And I feel like us as humans, like we've tried to learn a lot from what other organisms can do and what specific properties they have and how that can maybe affect us or improve our lives and how just like kind of that stuff. So what I found was that like learning how organisms interact with like the magnetic field can improve humans' understanding of how to use the magnetic fields for like our own uses of like navigation and purposes and stuff like that. So I think it's really cool how we can like we think we know so much as like a human race, but like there's so much that we can learn from like other organisms, and I find that really cool.
And I think the fact that there are things that we cannot sense as humans that other animals can, and it kind of goes hand in hand with learning about that. And then kind of, I don't necessarily think it's important to learn about something to figure out how we can apply it as humans, but, learning about what are some things that animals can detect and then how might we be able to use that. But just the fact that animals detect things that we can't, they have senses that we don't or can detect, even with vision, there are some animals that can see more colors than what we can, to me, that's very fascinating.
And
Yeah, or like peripheral.
Right.
Yeah. And if I hear about like an animal that's super good at smelling or super good at running, I'm not really like impressed because typically when we think of animals, I always think of them as having heightened senses than humans in some parts. But this, like a magnetic field, I've never I don't think of it like that. So this was like I think a lot of people know that plenty of animals have better senses than humans. Like there are a lot of things that animals are better at than humans are. But this to me was a very unique one, and that was really cool to hear about.
Yeah, like can you imagine if like magnetic like sensing that was like a sixth sense? Like we don't just have five senses. Like I always wonder sometimes like if we had more senses. Like I know we kind of have like that sixth sense of when we can like sense like someone's like kind of looking at us or we're kind of in danger and kind of those things. But I just wonder, like, what if we carried other traits, but we just lost as human beings? And well, now I'm getting into like humans, but like again, animals are really cool. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. I thought it was kind of cool. And I like the way they did it, like having it in an actual like setting where they are. And because, you know, they are kind of directed towards like that southeast area, because yellow eels, that's where they want to go to then be silver eels and then to produce. But then also just like in a laboratory setting where it's controlled. So, and I thought it was cool how they also used the same eels too. So it's not just like random, like, you know. But, yeah. All right.
Mary, could you put the link to the paper in the chat?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just thought it was really interesting. I wanted to read up on it a little more. So
Yeah, I was like double checking their acknowledgements and stuff like that. I'm like, wait, I hope it's not biased. But it's just funded by um, the Norwegian Institute of Marine Research, so like projects. So, and it's related to plankton, which, as we discussed, kind of have that sense of magnetic orientation. So makes sense why they were like, oh, let's try and figure it out. Maybe an eel. So also, I thought like the device they used was like kind of cool. I mean, I know you punch, you're like kind of in engineering, but like yeah, no, they like created this like acrylic structure um and I don't know, had these flaps of the sides to favor like rotation and all like this mechanisms and stuff. Like, I don't know, I just cannot do that.
I'm more of the coding and computer type, but still pretty interesting
Oh,
stuff.
okay. Yeah. So I gotta like, I don't know, probably code how to.
I mean, yeah, I mean, computer science is a very flexible field. Can go into a lot of different places with that. Yeah, this is interesting. Thanks for the presentation.
Of course. Sorry for having a coffee attack, Admiral. But I mean, it was a good intermission, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's it for today's meeting. I hope you guys had a good discussion and learned something new today. I know when I was reading more about it, um, by by itself, like the article was pretty easy to digest. So I think that helped. So really anyone can read it. I know like for me, I have a little bit of biology background, but again, with any word that I like, any of the words that I was like, I don't know what this is, I just like search it up and then I'm like, oh, okay, that's what it is. So
Yeah.
it's not too bad of a read. So I definitely recommend it if you guys want to check it out. But yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's it for today. We'll see each other next week, and we'll figure out maybe what kind of documentary we'll watch. We can maybe figure out one while we're all together, and
should I
have.
bring a game too, just in case? I have like
Oh
really
yeah.
old Trivial Pursuit. I don't know if that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, food and fun. Just, I know, I know for me, I'm like, I know the next couple weeks are gonna be a little bit much, so might as well just relax a little bit while we can.
As always, great presentation. I had a blast.
Good. All right. I'll see everyone next week.
Bye.